we tell ourselves stories that aren't true about how I'm stuck with it now. This is what I have to do. This is the path I've chosen. This is a stable career. It's not worth the risk that comes with changing. But at the end of the day, you get back to the basics. We're human beings, not human doings. So what we do day to day in our career shouldn't define us, and it shouldn't be something that we feel so locked into that we don't have permission to change.
Hello, and welcome to the Shift Your Day Job podcast. I'm Brittany Cates, your host on this incredible journey of career transformation. Get ready for inspiring stories, valuable insights, and a roadmap to shift your mindset towards a more fulfilling professional life. In each episode, we explore the remarkable journeys of individuals who made a career change, offering motivation, strategies, and the confidence to pursue your dreams. Whether you're feeling stuck, contemplating a change, or just seeking a dose of inspiration, this podcast is your weekly companion. Tune in every Thursday as we uncover the secrets to shifting your day job. Hello and welcome. I'm so glad that you've joined me today on another episode of the Shift Your Day Job podcast. Before I jump into introducing my guest, I would like to share with you my free offer. It's a brief video training about how to successfully shift into your dream career now and avoid the one big mistake that I see women making when it comes to searching for jobs online. In this training, I will address this big mistake and teach you how to reframe your job search strategy in order to build your confidence and take more effective actions. The reason why this is so important is because by understanding this one common mistake that people make, it will empower you to not only avoid it, but take control of your career transition. So if you're interested in this training, please send me a DM on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook, and I would be happy to share the link with you and help you along on your career shift journey. In this episode, I'm joined by Janis Brooks-Smeltzer, a consultant in indigenous relations and corporate training who has carved out a truly meaningful career path. Janis's journey is all about redefining success, staying true to your values, and finding ways to thrive, even when work life throws some serious curveballs. Starting in her family's business, Janis later took the bold step of building her own consulting firm, with a mission deeply aligned with her personal values. Together, we dive into the challenges of burnout, the importance of self-care, and what it really means to live and work authentically. Janis shares some of her go-to tools for personal growth, like grounding exercises, breath work, and focusing on joy and gratitude. If you're navigating a big career shift or just looking to feel more connected and balanced in your work, Janis's wisdom will be exactly what you need today. Please join me in welcoming Janis Brooks-Smeltzer to the podcast. Hi, Janis. Welcome to the Shift Your Day Job podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brittany. How are you?
Good, thanks. I'm excited to have you share your story on the podcast. If you don't mind starting out with your career journey and where you started, how it's evolved, and what you're doing now, that would be great.
Absolutely. So I always say that I have a bit of a unique career path. So I was able to learn and become involved in the business that I eventually went into through my mom's career. So she was a trailblazer in an area around Aboriginal and indigenous relations in Canada, which also meant, because that pulled on her lived experience and her family background of being of First Nations ancestry, that it was something that I got to be exposed to in a personal way. So I started going to meetings and helping out at workshops and doing things probably from the time that I was about 12 years old, which is very different. And so when I graduated from high school, I knew that I wanted to go into something related. So I had the opportunity to actually start working in a job that I would eventually go into while I was in university. So I started out the first summer out of high school, and I became a consultant working in indigenous relations and helping corporations work with First Nations communities. And I built myself into that role. I went to school and did a degree in business management and ended up working in that partnership in the family business for 18 years of my career. So it was a very different trajectory than a lot of folks have, being able to grow into that role and doing it for half of my life in a formal capacity that way. Shifting out of that was a big change for sure.
So, what are you doing now?
So I made a decision a couple of years ago to leave the company. And there were a number of things that were going on in my life and sort of the opportunities around career pieces that I just didn't feel like I was in a space that allowed me to do and be everything that I wanted to be. And I decided to make that shift and go into business for myself. So now I have built a consulting firm and I am the principal and collaborate with other consultants as opposed to having a team with me working in indigenous relations still, but moving into corporate training and doing a lot more work around organizational education, organizational culture shifts, and looking at how to do that from a more strategic internal level than just the external work.
Wow. It sounds so A, I love the meaningful work that you're doing. And B, it sounds so technical in a way, right? You must be really smart and really good at what you do. Obviously, you've done it for so long, but to be like strategic and organized and helping with a plan to totally shift a company's culture and perspective on how they approach their
Yeah,
people is,
I I appreciate that.
it seems
It's
like,
big. It's big and it's a lot, and it's an interesting thing because I have these funny conversations sometimes even with my family and friends, and they're like, "What is it that you actually do?" I'm like, "That is such a good question." And some days I can't even answer it. And that to me is what's so beautiful about the opportunity that exists within career. I've been able to redefine it into something that works for me. And what I really value is I value impact. And what that means for me is that my work has got to be dynamic because it always has to be able to change and adapt. Impact looks different wherever I go. And so for consulting, that's the beautiful blend where I can take the skills that I have from my work in business and the degree and all of the other things I've done, but I can really bring in the lived experience, my sort of unique edge in terms of what I've lived, what I've done, what I've witnessed working with all of these different clients over 18 years became my strongest skill set. So it was actually the value that I had as an individual that opened this opportunity for me to bring my career into a new level.
that's awesome. It sounds like you were able to take control and be the CEO of your career, right? What do I want it to look like? And what's my trajectory that I want? Because I feel that's where the impact is going to be made the most and where my skills are going to be utilized the best way.
Absolutely. And another piece that was so important for me there, I think, was the idea that I needed to reevaluate what success looked like from a career perspective. And that was a big motivator for my departure is that the way that I was working and the type of work that I was doing was burning me out. It was physically, mentally, emotionally taxing. I was unhappy. I was dealing with physical stress symptoms. I wasn't healthy. I wasn't well. And I just knew that there had to be a better way to do that. And so being able to have that moment of reflection to say, okay, what does success look like for me? And understanding that impact was a big piece of that. I was able to shift the way that I approached the work that I was doing. And I also really restructured how I wanted to move forward as a professional woman and what that looked like. And a big part of that was this idea of wellness and self care. And for me, it wasn't balance because I think we put pressure on ourselves when we use that word. And sometimes people think that means we always need to have some balance on both sides, that it needs to stay that way. But when it comes to career and it comes to business development, probably my greatest strength in that has been resilience and adaptability because those things shift and having them shift is okay. as long as we take care of both sides.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to consider when we talk a lot about like work life balance or having balance in all different areas of our life. Maybe that's not really what we want, even though it's a buzzword that I think
Yeah.
is the answer. But yeah, like what I'm gathering from that is it's not really about balancing, it's about defining what success means to you and then focusing on the things that are going to get you there and make you feel the way you want to feel.
Absolutely. And I think holding space for yourself on that journey. And that's where there are times, especially when you're going through these big shifts, that you might have to put in more time into your business or into your job search or into your skill development. You aren't going to always be able to hold balance in that same way. But that's exactly it. What is it that you need to do to move yourself to that next place or support yourself in that step? And sometimes that does look like rest or self care or recharging. But sometimes it does look like encouraging yourself to push out of that comfort zone, to extend, to expand, and to grow. And it's okay to go through those seasons as well.
Yeah. I love that advice. Thank you. I'm curious when you were recognizing that there was burnout happening and that something had to change. How long did that creep up on you or did it like hit you all at once? Did you live in that for a while or were you a little more self-aware to be able to say, "No, I got to make a change now?" How did that look like for you?
I'll be very vulnerable and honest here. I lived in it for a long time. I would love to say that I was so self aware and I noticed it, but that is not true. And I think that's an important thing for people and women, especially in career roles, to be honest about. Burnout can be a big dark cloud that follows you for a really long time before you do something about it. And so I can look back in my career and probably see a period of 4 to 5 years where what I was pushing through and continuing to try to stay engaged in wasn't serving me in a good way. And it wasn't really until I hit that bottom point and I had to shift because of my health that I realized what was actually going on. And then I got the self-awareness that I needed to be like, "Oh, okay, that's what was happening. That's why things were going the way they were."
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that for sure. Because I think it's so relatable and I can see people, and I don't know if you experience like the after effects of, oh, why did it take me so long? And I can't believe I lived that way for 5 years. Was that a part of your journey at all? Or how are you able to reconcile like
Um,
that was the path I needed, maybe?
I've absolutely had those moments where I was like, "I just wish I could have done this or I would have saved myself." But as you said, like part of the path is having to go through that. And for me, being on the other side of it now, it's given me such clarity on what my values are, what I can do to support myself better as I move forward into growing my business and career. It's shown me a lot about the supports that I need that I was unaware of or unwilling to look at before, and how important that connection piece is. Yeah, it was a process that I think I needed to go through to fully understand and know how to navigate it differently. And it's interesting, one thing that stands out so clear to me was connecting with someone that I had worked with when I was in a really dark place and struggling with that anxiety and that career burnout and trying to continue pushing through when I was unhealthy, who saw me maybe 6 or 8 months into starting my new business. And when we connected, that person said, "Oh my gosh, you just feel so much lighter. Everything is just lighter." And it wasn't even that there was a big description from that other than energetically, it was so noticeable and the way that I showed up changed so much. And I think I did have to carry that sort of heaviness of the burnout and the experience to be able to see what the other side really could be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think I love those aha moments that we're able to have when we can see, look how far it come and really give ourselves credit and acknowledgement and like love ourselves for it. But yeah, there has to be that contrast in order for you to really fully appreciate it. And I think a lot of us as human beings, we're scared of it. Like we're scared of doing something that's hard or difficult or challenging to us. And yet that's the only way that we learn and grow.
Yeah, and I think what's been so helpful for me with that is getting really basic and reminding myself that as humans, going very primal in our brains, we can act from two places. We can act from fear or we can act from love. And that's been something that I brought into my career journey and my professional development. Am I doing this from a place of fear, or do I have love for myself and the life that I want to build in this choice? And being able to connect into that and use that as a guide to move forward has been really helpful.
Yeah. I feel like that's a theme that I've been hearing a lot in recent weeks. And so I love that you bring that up because it goes back to what you're talking about with energy, like the energy that you were emitting before and then after. And it made me think of that concept. Okay, where are we coming? Like, where are we operating from? That fear space or that love space? And if you're not really sure, like, tune into what is the energy that you're feeling right now? Do you feel weighted down or do you feel like really stressed or tapping into the visceral feelings that you're having can be good clues into determining, okay, how am I showing up and choosing to live my life or choosing to show up in my career? And those could be good clues to help you figure out what you really want. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you ask yourself the question, is this the career path that I want? To be sure that you're framing that answer in the right way. Because when I look back, I could have externally asked anyone around me, do you think I'm successful? And everyone would have said, absolutely, you're crushing it. I was so good at the work that I was doing. And I was like booked out past my capacity. So it wasn't about my ability to perform. And I think it's really important to separate that burnout piece from that, because burnout doesn't mean that you're disengaged to the point of not performing. Burnout can be all of these other things. And if you are the type of person who's inherently driven, people pleasing, or stuck in any of those patterns, you are going to put your needs second. So being able to get to, like you said, that energetic place to be really honest with your reflection as well, to say, how do I feel in this role? Am I being able to show up as the person I want to? Am I happy? Am I contributing or feeling valued or whatever it is, but getting to that place of that personal connection of feeling instead of just focusing, as we so often do, on our outputs.
Mhm. For sure. And going through the motions or just being wrapped up in this is just my day to day. This is just normal for me. And yeah, it takes like a stepping back of sorts, whether that's like figuratively stepping back and giving yourself time to think, time by yourself, even just in nature or somewhere that you can really take a truly deep breath and be with yourself, or even taking yourself somewhere completely different. Like I recently went on a trip for the holiday weekend and I came back from that with so many new insights about myself and how I showed up on that trip and how I show up in my day to day and kind of recognizing the differences and trying to decide, okay, is that how I want to continue or not?
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we allow ourselves the space for that type of reflection, we can take it to a deep place if we're ready or willing. And for me, what resonates there is that idea of, who am I when I go to work? And when I went through this shift in that career and the trajectory of where I was going, I realized that I didn't want separation. I didn't want a professional version of me and a personal version of me. I wanted alignment, and having that authenticity and that ability to show up as the person that I am, no matter where I'm going or what I'm doing, has been so empowering. And it was getting out of, like you said, those spaces and places that you're so familiar with. So you actually remember how you want to show up, who you want to be, what energy you want to have. And then you can figure out, how do I find or how do I create the opportunities to allow that going forward? And I think opening our mind to the possibility when it comes to, like, where is that next path? What comes after this? To just allow yourself to see that it can be so different than anything you considered. And that's sometimes where that best alignment actually lives.
Yeah. I think, that is one thing that I notice a lot of people struggle with, like opening up their mind to possibilities that are beyond what are right in front of them. Especially when you've been in a career for so long that you don't see another avenue, or you're, oh, well, I'll just stay in the same field, or the same company, and I'll just pivot or whatever. And sometimes that's not always where you are going to show up more authentically, and I can completely relate to that comment because I felt like when I was a teacher, I just felt like I couldn't be truly myself when I was at work. And I felt like I had to put on a show and convince people that I was fine when I looked around at other people and thought, how do they are they not struggling too? How do they love their job so much? And I am like, I gotta get out of here. And yeah, the authenticity is the only way that we are going to truly connect with other people and ourselves, I think.
Yeah, and I think what you just talked through there reminds me of the importance around permission for ourselves to change. And I think when it comes to something like career, especially if you've chosen something that requires education and schooling and certification and all of these things, we tell ourselves stories that aren't true about how I'm stuck with it now. This is what I have to do. This is the path I've chosen. This is a stable career. It's not worth the risk that comes with changing. But at the end of the day, you get back to the basics. We're human beings, not human doings. So what we do day to day in our career shouldn't define us, and it shouldn't be something that we feel so locked into that we don't have permission to change. And so I think even for you sharing that and talking about understanding or coming to that point of realization that, hey, this might not be for me, even if it's for other people, and giving that permission to explore, that's okay. Just because it works for other people doesn't mean it has to work for you too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that can be applied in a lot of spaces in our lives. But I remember when I was leaving teaching, like I was packing up my classroom and loading up my car, and one of my teachers on my team, she was like, "Wait, you're not going to keep teaching?" And I was like, "No." And she's, "Would you?" What? She was just like so baffled about it, and I was like, "Why is that strange? Like, why do you find that disturbing?" Apparently, I don't understand. And I think partly it's because like teaching was her life, like it defined her so much because she really was a great teacher. And yeah, allowing that to be true for her and allowing mine to be true for me, and it not holding any weight on my decision of what's best for me.
Absolutely. I have a very dear friend that this just makes me think of because she was a lawyer and had her own firm and was making incredible impact in the work that she was doing. But she worked in family law, and that was tough work. And she was burnt out, and she was at the point where she knew that she was burnt out. And her passion and her true joy is in wildlife photography. And it was something that she had done just for fun, but people connected to it. It resonated. And so I had this beautiful opportunity to support her through our friendship in what ended up becoming a career shift for her. where she closed down her law practice and became a wildlife photographer. And she ended up having this beautiful opportunity to fill a huge corporate order that started her entire company. Now she's hosting a studio tour next week and is being featured. And it was one of those things where it was like, had she not been able to give herself permission to explore something, even if the people around her didn't understand it or didn't value it, she would have missed out on this. And when you talk about that shift, it's such a wild thing to have seen play out, and for her to talk to people we know and say, "Oh, I actually closed my law firm." And people expect maybe she's gone into some other type of business or advising, and she says what she does, and they're like, "What? You're a photographer now? Why would you do that?" She's like, "Because I want to have a happy life." And it's that reminder, give yourself permission for happiness. And that's something that I think we often set to the side, and we shouldn't. We should prioritize it.
Yeah. If there is like a desire on your sorry, if there's a desire on your heart, you have to honor that. And the more that you push it away, the less authentic that you're going to show up, right? And people love to hear things like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool. You're doing what as a profession?" Like, where there's a will, there's a way. And where there's a vision of what you want your life to be, you can make it happen. You have so much more power than you.
Absolutely. And going back to a little bit of what we talked about before on that growth side, I think there's so much that comes from learning to accept discomfort and understanding that discomfort does not mean we're unsafe. And I say that because to me, that clarity and the definition and the words we're using are so, so important. Discomfort often just comes from the fact that we're unfamiliar. It's something we don't know. The feeling is new, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And that's that shift really when you're going into moving out of burnout and going to a place where you're actually allowing yourself to work from joy and love and happiness. Sometimes people shy away from that because they don't know what to do because they've never experienced it. And that doesn't mean like it's not a good way to work. It just means you need to get used to that and settle into it. And so I think understanding that transition takes time and the discomfort settles when you create that new framework for your mind to work out of, or you create that new energetic groundwork or place to work from. That's when it starts to shift and all of that discomfort goes away. And we don't have to be stuck in the place of struggle. That's where we hit that place of ease and flow, where things actually just come to us and we see reflected externally the work that we've been doing internally.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think of going back to what is it that you value? And if you value something, even though it's scary or unknown territory, right? If it is truly a value of yours, you're going to do it through the hard stuff. So, like I mentioned, I traveled recently and traveling's stressful, right? Was like,
Hmm.
it's, you can be, you have this vision in your mind of, oh, I'm going to this new place and I'm super excited to see all these new things. And then you like are at the airport, or then you like get there and you can't find like transportation, or you're like, don't know where you're going and you get really stressed, or the people you're with. And then it's, do I really value seeing new places and traveling like this? Am I willing to sacrifice, you know, the uncomfortable part of travel in order to actually experience this new thing? And so that's like more of a tangible, like something I've done recently that really relates to what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think in that bigger picture and looking at that sort of career and identity shift that comes along with transition, often the price of becoming who we want to be comes at the cost of our old self. And so it becomes that question of what am I willing to let go of and to shed, to change and to move through? And when you talk about that value piece, I think the one thing that I've found is such a good tool to assist in that is having those reflection moments where I can say, how can I respond as the person that I aspire to be? Not who I am right now, because I know what it is that I would be on autopilot to do and decide. But if I'm in a space where I am craving or seeking or looking for change, that means that my thought process and my decision process needs to be different in order to have a different outcome. And so I think being able to have that perspective sometimes and say, okay, if I want to be more joyful in my work, what action can I take that would respond in a way that person would respond? Or if I want to have more self care time or more peace or more excitement, whatever it is, and giving ourselves the space to have those little shifts and respond in those different ways and test out what happens when I do things differently. How does it feel to be that different version of me and find that connection to move us forward and move us through the things that sometimes feel challenging?
It goes back to what you were saying earlier about we can create the reality that we want, right? Like we can create if you're in your job and you're bored or you are uninspired or maybe you're having trouble with a coworker, right? Like how do you shift that in the moment? That's what you're talking about, right? Okay, how would I show up differently if I wanted this situation to look different? And so I think that's a great question to keep in our back pocket, especially in the moments where we're like, okay, wait a second.
When you feel that resistance or that tension, I think that's a great time to ask that. And then on the flip side of that, when you're looking at the transition points or the career changes or what comes next on my path, how do I continue to build and grow if I don't totally know where I'm going? What connects there for me is a similar question to say, what's one thing I can do today that moves me a step closer to where I want to be? And it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be big. Some days, honestly, like today, it was putting on a pair of earrings so that I felt like I was a little bit more polished and put together. That was an action. I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. Just a Zoom video. And then I'm like, you know what? The person that I want to show up as in my life and the person that I want to become in my career and in my business, she's got that put together look. And so I challenge myself continually to do those little things that allow me to elevate that version of me and connect to that next person and that next phase of my life that I'm moving towards.
Yeah. I love that example because it's so relatable. For me, especially, I'm like, I think for a lot of people, especially since pandemic days where you just lived in your PJs all day. And it's like getting back to that. Oh, it's fine. It's fine. And then, no, I want to show up this way, a certain way. I want to feel different. And so
Yeah.
making
And
that small
and
choice.
small choices, that's the big thing too, right? I think we forget that the change that we're seeking doesn't have to be big and monumental and transformational overnight. And often that's not what sustains us anyway. So where we can find those little moments to be like, yeah, okay, here's a chance to do it different. Here's a chance to change my response. Here's something I can do that I haven't done. That's where we grow. And it's all of those little pieces that we build together that actually create those big pivots and put us on those beautiful paths forward.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that reminder. You mentioned support earlier in the conversation. Can you talk a little bit about the support that you had as you made a career transition?
Absolutely. So, as a very honest, recovering type A, overachieving people pleaser, I very much lived the majority of my life and early working years just with the assumption and incorrect idea that I needed to do it all. And so that was do it all in terms of extending myself professionally, do it all in terms of extending myself personally, and carrying that load in a way that was all on me. And when I got to that point of burnout and getting to the place of really realizing that this was impacting all the areas of my life, my happiness, my joy, my relationships, my friendships, it was understanding that when you have that much pressure and stress and chaos circling you, you're not made to do that alone. And that part of the reason I wasn't succeeding in moving through it is because I was trying to do it by myself. And so it was realizing that support and that network was going to look different at different times, but that the first place it started was with me being honest about the fact that I couldn't do it all, but secondly, that I didn't need to. And that asking for that help and reaching out and creating that support network wasn't weak. It had nothing to do with my worthiness or my importance or my ability to be successful. And so when I got out of my own way, some of the supports that were really helpful for me were counseling. There was a lot of trauma and a lot of really challenging experiences that I had gone through in my life that were playing out in so many ways in patterns in terms of how I approached my work that I needed to deal with. I looked at the opportunities around how do I grow the tools and the skills I have when it comes to things like balancing and regulating my nervous system? How do I learn to take care of my energy? So I started looking at that personal development, that wellness side, taking courses, going to retreats, getting into sort of grounding practices, meditation, journaling, all of these support pieces that really allowed me to build out this toolkit to say, this is what I need right now. This is going to help me. This person is who I need right now. And for the first time, being really open and honest with the people around me. And we forget, I think, or we stop telling ourselves somewhere along the line that the people that love us want to see us succeed. They want us to be our best selves. They want us to be healthy. They want us to be happy. And most of the time, they will help us to do that. And all we have to do is be willing to ask. So I got to the point where I could reach out to my friends, I could reach out to my family, I could ask when I needed support, but I could also set boundaries and they understood why. And that was a big thing that I had to learn. How do I do that? How can I become confident and comfortable with saying no, with changing the energy that I have to give to others, with shifting the capacity I have to solve other people's problems? Because for the first time, I prioritized me. And that support piece was important there because people have to understand that. And you need to communicate what your support looks like. Maybe that's for them showing up to you, but in some spaces or certain situations, that support might look like space. It might look like less time together or not seeing each other as regularly. And so just being wide open to the fact that the support you need can shift. It might not be expected, but to just, yeah, make sure that you ask for it if you need it.
Yeah. I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people is speaking up and asking. You mentioned the communicating your boundaries piece as well, which sounds like so daunting to what could be for some people. But yeah, really. And it comes back to that authenticity and like being true to yourself, right? Making sure that you are getting the help and support you need because we aren't here to do life alone. And yet recognizing, like you mentioned, patterns. I think there's a lot, especially when we're talking about loved ones and family. Codependency is a real thing that a lot of people it's just that's how it's always been in their family, like space. And so once you're recognize, no, this is what I need, and learning more about those boundaries and how to communicate them is definitely important. And it looks different for everybody. So,
It does. And I think the reality of moving through a season of life where that's what you're doing and that's what you're starting to bring into your space, it means that the people sometimes in your support network, they're going to shift as well. And not everybody can meet you where you're at in that journey, and that's okay. And I think I've had to really remind myself that at the end of the day, sometimes you do have to prioritize what works for you. And if that doesn't align for other people, that's okay. It doesn't have to. As long as you can be sure that you're doing what's in your power to be true to yourself and take care of you, it's okay for the things around you to shift. And sometimes that's what's needed to really move us into that next phase.
Yeah. Even if it seems scary, right? For change is scary and changing all like you mentioned earlier, growth. We talk about growth and it's just such a natural part of life. And yet there's so much resistance to it. So when you're thinking about changing relationships, like a relationship that you've had and it's been a certain way for so long, that could feel scary and daunting. And yet it again, it's coming back to being true to yourself and what do I need? And not being selfish. I'm truly just trying to improve myself in a way that I've never done before. And it might not make sense to other people, but I want it. And therefore, I'm going to do these hard things.
Yeah. And when I talked about my transition, I left a business that I was a partner with my mom.
Yeah.
And I would be lying if I said that was a smooth departure because absolutely it wasn't. Like some of the most core and central things in my life, relationship wise, time wise, identity wise, shifted in very big ways. And what was so important for me to remember in those moments was that where I want to go and who I want to be and the life that I want to build for myself matters more than me protecting the feeling of other people. And it was, having to understand that wasn't always going to feel good as I moved through it, but also being so trusting of the process and trusting of myself that the decisions that I was making and the intuition that was guiding me on this new path was in my best interest. And so that was a really important thing to have those moments, to have those checks to say, is this going to serve me before anyone else? Yes. And then I knew that I could move forward in that decision confidently, even if other people didn't understand it. And so that was an important way to learn to do things differently and approach things with a different response and still know somewhere that it was going to be what was right for me.
Thank you for that explanation. I feel like you said it more eloquently than I was trying to say it. So yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being so vulnerable and like open with your experience. I'm curious if you can share any specific tools that you might recommend for people who uh, are ready to get to that next level of self awareness and grow and embodying the self trust and practicing those and things that you're talking about, right? Like the perspective shifts that we need to make in order to start living more authentically.
Yeah. So I think for me, the biggest thing there is that you need to find what works for you. And in that sense, that meant that I transitioned through all kinds of different tools and experiences. And what was most important for me was learning how to regulate my nervous system and how to feel safe. And why that was such a critical shift was because so much of the fear and anxiety and stress that comes with change is, again, that fear of the unknown. And we're fearful because we don't feel safe. So when I could learn to create that sense of safety, like from a physical perspective in my body, I could get my mind to a place where I could actually explore that opportunity or what does that look like. So some of the things that were really beneficial and impactful to me were grounding, being really intentional about being in nature. And whether it's bare feet on the ground, hands on a tree, having that connection where we actually are moving the energy from our body back out into a natural and neutral state. Getting back in touch with things like intentional breath, whether that's breath work or meditation or whatever works for people. I think what's more important is just realizing that we need to be present and aware, and doing something like focusing on our breathing gives us a tool to do that. And so many of these things, I think, talk about that importance of the physical connection to our brain. And if we are creating feelings of safety and calm in our body, that's where we can slow down those anxious loops. Yeah, getting in touch with that embodiment piece, finding things that feel good for you. And I think probably the other, I don't know if it's so much a tool as a practice, I would say is focusing daily on joy, gratitude, and fun. So ensuring that even if it's 5 seconds within that day, something has made you happy, you found something to be grateful for, and you do something that's fun, whether it's laughter, it's play, it's creativity, but something that brings you into that elevated space of energy and moves into that positivity. And I had a conversation with a friend lately around this, and we came down to it. And it's, yeah, energy flows where focus goes. So when you find the chance to focus on those things regularly, that's what starts to show up and repattern.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. And speaking of connecting with nature, it just makes me think of your Instagram account and the beautiful pictures that you share of the nature that's really like right outside your door in Victoria, British Columbia. Is that where you, am I right?
North of Victoria, but
North of
close.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
On
Yeah.
Vancouver Island. Yeah.
So speaking of Instagram, can you tell people how to connect with you if they want to learn more about what you do?
So my Instagram is soft, slow CEO. And a big reason behind that handle and what I show up to do on Instagram is just to remind and empower women in the fact that you can have success and abundance and wealth and great career impact and all of these things without sacrificing the quality of your life. And I think that we need to build leaders and business women and professionals who understand that our value first and foremost is as humans, and that we actually do best when we work from a place that allows us to live softly and live slowly and focus on presence and being. If you resonate with that, that's the place to connect with me, and would totally welcome connecting with anyone that's listening that has walked through this or is walking through it and wants some support.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that and for being here today. I've loved our conversation and your energy that you bring. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in today, and a huge thank you to our guest for sharing such valuable insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback helps others discover the podcast, and it means the world to me as I continue to bring you content that supports your career change journey. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're feeling stuck in a career that doesn't fulfill you anymore, I'm here to help. My one-on-one career coaching program is designed specifically for women who are ready to break free from the grind and discover a career that truly excites them. In our sessions, we'll uncover what's holding you back, identify your true passions, and create a clear, actionable plan to transition you into a career that aligns with your deepest values. You can get in touch with me directly at shiftyourdayjob@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on social media at shiftyourdayjob. I'd love to hear from you and support you on this journey. Until next time, I'm your host, Brittany Cates, and together, let's shift your day job.